Hi, I'm Marcus Holmes, the facilitator of the Love and Stuff community, and I'm pleased to bring you another Black History moment on Sunday, February 7th at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This is pre-recorded content. We are also live on LinkedIn Live, YouTube events, and Twitch TV, as well, of course, the Facebook pages, Marcus R. Holmes and the Love and Stuff page. Join us every day at 7 o'clock p.m. for a Black History Month moment. And today we begin this week observing, reflecting, and sharing the writings of many African Americans. And today we thought we would start with the writings of Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass, who was born in 1818, but many argue whether or not he was born on February 14th. 1818 to 1895, was a former slave who became a nationally recognized abolitionist orator during the antebellum period. During the Civil War, he worked tirelessly for the emancipation of enslaved African Americans, and during the decade following the war, he was arguably the most influential African American leader in the nation. What is now known as the "What to the Slave is the 4th of July" speech was delivered on July 5th, 1852, as an address to the Rochester Ladies Anti-Slavery Society in Rochester, New York. To provide just a little more historical context before we go into the speech, at the time of the delivery of the speech, Douglass had been living in Rochester for several years, editing a weekly abolitionist newspaper. He was invited to give a 4th of July speech by the Ladies Anti-Slavery Society of Rochester. In the early 1850s, tension over slavery was high amongst the county. The Compromise of 1850 had failed to resolve the controversy over the admission of new slave-holding states to the Union. The Fugitive Slave Act, passed by Congress as part of this compromise, was bitterly resented by the northern states. Harriet Beecher Stowe's novel about slavery, Uncle Tom's Cabin, or Life Among the Lowly, had been published a few months before and unexpectedly became a national bestseller. Across the country, people were thinking and arguing about slavery, abolitionism, and the future of the nation. This, for the purpose of this celebration, is the 4th of July. It is the birthday of your national independence and your political freedom. This, to you, is what the Passover was to the emancipated people of God. It carries your minds back to the day and to the act of your great deliverance, and to the signs and to the wonders associated with that act and that day. This celebration also marks the beginning of another year of your national life and reminds you that the Republic of America is now 76 years old. I am glad, fellow citizens, that your nation is so young. 76 years, though a good old age for a man, is but a mere speck in the life of a nation. 70 years and 10 is the allotted time for individual men, but nations number their years by thousands. According to this fact, you are, even now, only in the beginning of your national career, still lingering in the period of childhood. I repeat, I am glad this is so. There is hope in the thought, and hope is much needed under the dark clouds which lower above the horizon. The eyes of the reformers met with angry flashes, portending disastrous times. But his heart may well beat lighter at the thought that America is young and that she is still in the impressionable stage of her existence. May he not hope that high lessons of wisdom, of justice, and of truth will yet give direction to her destiny? Were the nation older, the patriot's heart might be sadder, and the reformer's brow heavier. Its future might be shrouded in gloom, and the hope of its prophets go out in sorrow. There is no consolation in the thought that America is young. Great streams are not easily turned into channels worn deep in the courses of age. They may sometimes seem in quiet and stately majesty and inundate the land, refreshing and fertilizing the earth with their mysterious properties. They may also rise in wrath and fury and bear away on their angry waves the accumulated wealth of years of toil and hardship. They, however, gradually flow back to the same old channel and flow on as serenely as ever. But while the river may not be turned aside, it may dry up and leave nothing behind but the withered branch and the unsightly rock to howl in the abyss-sweeping wind. The sad tale of departed glory. As with rivers, so with nations. On the 2nd of July, 1776, the old Centennial Congress, to the dismay of the lovers of ease and the worshipers of property, clothed that dreadful idea, the idea of total separation of the colonies from the crown, with all the authority of national sanction. They did so in the form of a resolution. And as we seldom hit upon resolutions, draw up in our own day, whose transparency is at all equal to this, it may refresh your minds and help my story if I read it. Resolved that these united colonies are, and of right, ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiances to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be dissolved, unquote. Citizens, your fathers made good that resolution. They succeeded. And today you reap the fruits of their success. The freedom gained is yours, and you therefore may properly celebrate this anniversary. The 4th of July is the first great fact in your nation's history, the very ring bolt in the chain of your yet undeveloped destiny. Pride and patriotism, not less than gratitude, prompt you to celebrate and to hold it in perpetual remembrance. I have said that the Declaration of Independence is the ring bolt to the chain of your nation's destiny. So indeed, I regard it. The principles contained in that instrument are saving principles. Stand by those principles. Be true to them on all occasions, in all places, against all foes, and at whatever cost. From the round top of your ship of state, dark and threatening clouds may be seen. Heavy billows like mountains in the distance disclose to the leeward huge forms of flinty rocks. That boat drawn, that chain broken, and all is lost. Cling to this day. Cling to it and to its principles with the grasp of a storm-tossed mariner to a spar at midnight. Fellow citizens, I am not wanting in respect for the fathers of this republic. The signers of the Declaration of Independence were brave men. They were great men too, great enough to be given fame to a great age. It does not often happen to a nation to raise at one time such a number of truly great men. The point from which I am compelled to view them is not certainly the most favorable, and yet I cannot contemplate their great deeds with less than admiration. They were statesmen, patriots, and heroes, and for the good they did and the principles they contended for, I will unite with you to honor their memory. They loved their country better than their own private interest, and though this is not the highest form of human excellence, all will concede that it is a rare virtue, and that when it is exhibited, it ought to command respect. He who will intelligently lay down his life for his country is a man whom it is not in human nature to despise. Your fathers staked their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor on the cause of their country. In their admiration of liberty, they lost sight of all other interest. They were peacemen, but they preferred revolution to peace, submission to bondage. They were quiet men, but they did not shrink from agitating against oppression. They showed forbearance, but that they knew its limits. They believed in order, but not in the order of tyranny. And with them, nothing was settled that was not right. With them, justice, liberty, and humanity were final, not slavery and oppression. You may well cherish the memory of such men. They were great in their day and generation. Their solid manhood stands out the more as we contrast it with these degenerate times. How circumspect, exact, and proportionate were all their movements. How unlike the politicians of an hour. Their statesmanship looked beyond the passing moment and stretched away in strength into the distant future. They seized upon eternal principles and set a glorious example in their defense. Mark them. Fully appreciating the hardship to be encountered, firmly believing in the right of their cause, honorably inviting the scrutiny of an onlooking world, reverently appealing to heaven to attest their sincerity, soundly comprehending the solemn responsibilities that they were about to assume, wisely measuring the terrible odds against them, your fathers, the fathers of this republic, did most deliberately, under the inspiration of a glorious patriotism and with a sublime faith in the great principles of justice and freedom, lay deep the cornerstone of the national superstructure, which has risen and still rises in grandeur around you. Fellow citizens, pardon me, allow me to ask, why am I called upon to speak here today? What have I, or those I represent, to do with your national independence? Are the great principles of political freedom and of natural justice embodied in that Declaration of Independence extended to us? And am I, therefore, called upon to bring our humble offerings to the national altar and to confess the benefits and express devout gratitude for the blessings resulting from your independence to us? Would to God, both for your sakes and ours, that an affirmative answer could be truthfully returned to these questions. Then would my task be light and my burden easy and delightful. For who is there so cold that a nation's sympathy could not warm him? Who so obdurate and dead to the claims of gratitude that would not thankfully acknowledge such priceless benefits? Who so stolid and selfish that would not give his voice to swell the hallelujahs of a nation's jubilee when the chains of servitude have been torn from his limbs? I am not that man. In a case like that, the dumb might eloquently speak and the lame man leap as a hart. But such is not the state of the case. I say it with a sad sense of the disparity between us. I am not included within the pale of glorious anniversary. Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us. The blessing in which you this day rejoice are not enjoyed in common. The rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence bequeathed by your fathers is shared by you, not me. The sunlight that brought light and healing to you has brought stripes and death to me. This 4th July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, I must mourn. To drag a man in fetters into the grand illuminated temple of liberty and call upon him to join you in joyous anthems where inhumane mockery and sacrilegious irony? Do you mean citizens to mock me by asking me to speak today? If so, there is a parallel to your conduct. And let me warn you that it is dangerous to copy the example of a nation whose crimes, towering up to heaven, went thrown down by the breath of the Almighty, burying that nation in irrevocable ruin. I can today make up the plaintive lament of a peeled and woe-smitten people. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down. Yea, we wept when we remembered Zion. We hanged our harps upon the willows in the midst thereof. For there they are carried us away captive, required of us a song. And they who wasted us required of us mirth, saying, sing us one of the songs of Zion. How can we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget her cunning. If I do not remember thee, let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. Fellow citizens, above your national tumultuous joy, I hear the mournful wail of millions, whose chains, heavy and grievous yesterday, are today rendered more intolerable by the jubilee shouts that reach them. If I do forget, if I do not faithfully remember those bleeding children of sorrow this day, may my right hand forget her cunning, and may my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. To forget them, to pass lightly over their wrongs, and to chime in with the popular theme would be treason most scandalous and shocking, and would make me a reproach before God and the world. My subject then, fellow citizens, is American slavery. I shall see this day and its popular characteristics from the slave's point of view. Standing there, identified with the American bondman, making his wrongs mine, I do not hesitate to declare with all of my soul that the character and conduct of this nation never looked blacker to me than on this 4th of July. Whether returned to the declarations of the past or to the professions of the present, the conduct of the nation seems equally hideous and revolting. America is false to the past, false to the present, and solemnly binds herself to be false to the future. Standing with God and the crushed and bleeding slave on this occasion, I will, in the name of humanity, which is outraged, in the name of liberty, which is fettered, in the name of the Constitution and the Bible, which are disregarded and trampled upon, dare to call into question and to denounce, with all the emphasis I can command, everything that serves to perpetuate slavery, the great sin and shame of America. I will not equivocate. I will not excuse. I will use the severest language I can command, and yet not one word shall escape me that any man whose judgment is not blinded by prejudice, or who is not at heart a slaveholder, shall not confess to be right and just. But I hear some of you, my audience, say, it is just in this circumstance that you and your brother abolitionists failed to make a favorable impression on the public mind. Would you argue more and denounce less? Would you persuade more and rebuke less? Your cause would be much more likely to succeed. But I submit, where all is plain, there is nothing to be argued. What point in the anti-slavery creed would you have me argue? On which branch of the subject do the people of this country need light? Must I undertake to prove that the slave is a man? That point is conceded already. Nobody doubts it. The slaveholders themselves acknowledge it in the enactment of laws for their government. They acknowledge it when they punish disobedience on the part of the slave. There are 72 crimes in the state of Virginia which, if committed by a Black man, no matter how ignorant he may be, subject him to the punishment of death, while only 2 of the same crimes will subject a white man to the like punishment. What is this but the acknowledgement that the slave is a moral, intellectual, and responsible being? The manhood of the slave is conceded. It is admitted in the fact that Southern statute books are covered with enactments forbidding, under severe crimes and penalties, the teaching of the slave to read. When you can point to any such laws in reference to the beast of the field, then I may consent to argue the manhood of the slave. when the dogs in your streets, when the fowls of the air, when the cattle on your hills, when the fish of the sea, when the reptiles that crawl shall be unable to distinguish the slave from a brute, then I will argue with you that the slave is a man. For the present, it is enough to affirm the equal manhood of the Negro race. Is it not astonishing that, while we are plowing, painting, and reaping, using all kinds of mechanical tools, erecting houses, constructing bridges, building ships, working in metals of grass, iron, copper, silver, and gold, that while we are reading, writing, and ciphering, acting as clerks, merchants, and secretaries, having among us lawyers, doctors, ministers, poets, authors, editors, orators, and teachers, that while we are engaged in all manner of enterprises common to other men, digging gold in California, capturing the whale on the Pacific, feeding sheep and cattle on the hillside, living, moving, acting, thinking, planning, living in families as husbands, wives, and children, and above all, confessing and worshiping the Christian's God, and looking hopefully for life and immortality beyond the grave, we are called upon to prove that we are men. Would you have me argue that man is entitled to liberty? That he is the rightful owner of his body? You have already declared it. Must I argue that the wrongfulness of slavery is a question for Republicans? Is it to be settled by the rule of logic and argumentation as a matter beset with great difficulty, involving a doubtful application of the principle of justice, hard to be understood? How should I look today in the presence of Americans, dividing and subdividing a discourse to show that men have natural right to freedom, speaking of it relatively and positively, negatively and affirmatively? To do so would be to make myself ridiculous and to offer an insult to your understanding. There is not a man beneath the canopy of heaven that does not know that slavery is wrong for him. What I am to argue that is wrong, to make men brutes, to rob them of their liberty, to work them without wages, to keep them ignorant of their relations to their fellow men, to beat them with sticks, to flay their flesh with the lash, to load their limbs with irons, to hunt them with dogs, to sell them at auction, to sunder their families, to knock out their teeth, to burn their flesh, to starve them into obedience and submission to their masters. Must I argue that a system thus marked with blood and stained with pollution is wrong? No, I will not. I have better employment for my time and strength than such arguments would imply. What then remains to be argued? Is it that slavery is not divine, that God did not establish it, that our doctors of divinity are mistaken? There is blasphemy in the thought that which is humane cannot be divine. Who can reason on such a proposition? They that can may, I cannot. The time for such argument is past. At a time like this, scorching irony, not convincing argument is needed. Oh, had I the ability and could read the nation's ear, I would today pour out a fiery stream of biting ridicule, blasting reproach, withering sarcasm, and stern rebuke. For it is not light that is needed, but fire. It is not the gentle shower, but thunder. We need the storm, the whirlwind, and the earthquake. The feeling of the nation must be quickened. The conscience of the nation must be roused. The propriety of the nation must be startled. The hypocrisy of the nation must be exposed. And its crimes against God and man must be proclaimed and denounced. What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him, more than all other days in the year, the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham. Your boasted liberty an unholy license. Your national greatness, swelling vanity. Your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless. Your denunciation of tyrants, brass-fronted impudence, your shouts of liberty and equality, hollow mockery, your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings, with all your religious parade and solemnity, are to him mere bombast, fraud, deception, impiety, and hypocrisy. A thin veil to cover up crimes which would disgrace a nation of savages. There is not a nation on the earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of the United States at this very hour. Go where you may, search where you will, roam through all the monarchies and despotisms of the world, travel through South Africa, search out every abuse, and when you have found the last, lay your facts by the side of the everyday practices of this nation, and you will say with me, for revolting barbarity and shameless hypocrisy, America reigns without a rival. But it is answered in reply to all this, that precisely what I have now denounced is, in fact, guaranteed and sanctioned by the Constitution of the United States, that the right to hold and to hunt slaves is a part of that Constitution framed by the illustrious fathers of this republic. Then I dare to affirm, notwithstanding all I have said before, your father basely stooped to palter with us in a double sense, and to keep the word of promise to the ear, but break it to the heart. And instead of being the honest men I have before declared them to be, they were the veriest impostors that ever practiced on mankind. This is the inevitable conclusion, and from it there is no escape. But I differ from those who charge this baseness on the framers of the Constitution of the United States. It is a slander upon their memory, at least, so I believe. There is not a time now to argue the constitutional question at length, nor have I the ability to discuss it as it ought to be discussed. The subject has been handled with mastery powerfully by Lysander Spooner, Esquire, by William Goodale, by Samuel E. Sewell, and last, though not least, by Gerrit Smith, Esquire. These gentlemen have, as I think, fully and clearly vindicated the Constitution from any design to support slavery for an hour. Let me ask, if it be not somewhat singular that if the Constitution were intended to be, by its framers and adopters, a slave-holding instrument, why neither slavery, slaveholding, nor slave can anywhere be found in it? Fellow citizens, there is no matter in respect to which the people of the North have allowed themselves to so ruinously imposed upon as that of the pro-slavery character of the Constitution. In that instrument I hold, there is neither warrant, license, nor sanction of the hateful thing, but interpreted as it ought to be interpreted, the Constitution is a glorious liberty document. Read its preamble, consider its purposes. Is slavery among them? Is it at the gateway, or is it in the temple? It is neither. While I do not intend to argue this question on the present occasion, let me ask, if it be not somewhat singular that if the Constitution were intended to be by its framers and adopters a slaveholding instrument, why neither slavery, slaveholding, nor slave can be found anywhere in it? What would be thought of an instrument drawn up, legally drawn up, for the purpose of entitling the city of Rochester to a tract of land in which no mention of land was made? Now, there are certain rules of interpretation for the proper understanding of all legal instruments. These rules are well established. They are plain, common sense rules, such as you and I and all of us can understand and apply without having passed years in the study of law. I scout the idea that the question of the constitutionality or unconstitutionality of slavery is not a question for the people. I hold that every American citizen has a fight to form an opinion of the Constitution and to propagate that opinion and to use all honorable means to make his opinion the prevailing one. Without this fight, The liberty of an American citizen would be as insecure as that of a Frenchman. Ex-Vice President Dallas tells us that the Constitution is an object to which no American mind can be too attentive and no American heart too devoted. He further says the Constitution in its words is plain and intelligible and is meant for the homebred, unsophisticated understandings of our fellow citizens. Senator Berrien tells us that the Constitution is the fundamental law, that which controls all others. The Charter of our liberties, which every citizen has a personal interest in understanding thoroughly. The testimony of Senator Breeze, Lewis Cass, and many others that might be named who are everywhere esteemed as sound lawyers, so regard the Constitution. I take it, therefore, that it is not presumption in a private citizen to form an opinion of that instrument. Now take the Constitution according to its plain reading, and I defy the presentation of a single pro-slavery clause in it. On the other hand, it will be found to contain principles and purposes entirely hostile to the existence of slavery. I have detained my audience entirely too long already. At some future period, I will gladly avail myself of an opportunity to give this subject a full and fair discussion. Allow me to say in conclusion, notwithstanding the dark picture I have this day presented of the state of the Union, I do not despair of this country. There are forces in operation which must inevitably work the downfall of slavery. The arm of the Lord is not shortened, and the doom of slavery is certain. I, therefore, leave off where I began, with hope. While drawing encouragement from the Declaration of Independence, the great principles it contains, and the genius of the American institution, my spirit is also cheered by the obvious tendencies of the age. Nations do not now stand in the same relation to each other that they did ages ago. No nation can now shut itself up from the surrounding world and trot round in the same old path of its fathers without interference. The time was when such could be done. Long established customs of hurtful character could formally fence themselves in and do their evil work with social impunity. Knowledge was then confined and enjoyed by the privileged few, and the multitude walked on in mental darkness. But a change has now come over the affairs of mankind. Walled cities and empires have become unfashionable. The arm of commerce is borne away from the gates of the strong city. Intelligence is penetrating the darkest corners of the globe. It makes its pathway over and under the sea, as well as on the earth. Wind, steam, and lightning are charted agents. Oceans no longer divide, but link nations together. From Boston to London is now a holiday excursion. Space is comparatively annihilated. Thoughts expressed on one side of the Atlantic are distinctly heard on the other. The far-off and almost fabulous Pacific rolls in grandeur at our feet. The celestial empire, the mysteries of ages, is being solved. The fiat of the Almighty, let there be light, has not yet spent its force. No abuse, no outrage, whether in taste, sport, or avarice, can now hide itself from the all-pervading light. The iron shoe and crippled foot of China must be seen in contrast with nature. Africa must rise and put on her yet unwoven garment. Ethiopia shall stretch out her hand unto God. And the fervent aspirations of William Lloyd Garrison, I say, and let every heart join in saying, God speed the year of Jubilee, the wide world o'er, when from their galling chains set free, the oppressed shall vilely bend the knee, and wear the yoke of tyranny like brutes no more. That year will come and freedom's reign, to man as plunders fights again restore. God speed the day when human blood shall cease to flow, and every time he understood the chains of human brotherhood, and every return for evil good, not blow for blow. That day will come, all feuds to end, and change into a faithful friend each foe. Godspeed the hour, the glorious hour, where none on earth shall exercise a lordly power, nor in a tyrant's present cower, but all to manhood's status tower by equal birth. That hour will come, to each to all, and from his prison house the thrall go forth. Until that year, day, hour arrive, with head and heart and hand I'll strive to break the ride and rend the gyve, the spoiler of his prey deprive, so witness heaven. And never from my chosen post, whate'er the peril or the cost, be driven. This has been our Black History Moment. I thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you will join us tomorrow and all throughout February. But this week we are focusing on the writings and writers in our African American diaspora and experience. Have a great. Thank you for tuning in. It was a lengthy piece, but an important piece, I think, when we think of the writings of African Americans in our collective from times before until times now. I hope that you will read the piece in its entirety. There are some redacted parts of that piece, or edited parts, I better say, of that piece that was done to preserve the integrity of the piece, but also to shorten the length just a bit. But it's a great piece of many of the writings and speeches of Frederick Douglass, and many were amazed at his ability to write so well and so poignantly after having been at first refused to be taught to read, right? He was taught to read by the daughter of the slave master. And so he went on to not only become educated, but to educate himself through reading, and became a standout writer. And many of his writings, of course, as this writing, have been well regarded and well reviewed and well criticized throughout time. And I believe they are writings that will stand the test of time. So tomorrow, Denise Irvin joins us, and we're going to have Valencia Etner joining us. We're going to hear from LaShawn Phoenix Coteran, LaShawn Phoenix Moore this week. All of them are either aficionados of literary works such as Toni Morrison and Zora Neale Hurston, and some of them are poets themselves. So we're excited for the writings that we will hear from in this week of Black History, and we'll move into next week where we'll look at figures in the public, as well as political and ecumenical figures of the public in the week following. And then we will close out our final week looking at some highlights of music, people who have made extraordinary contributions to music. And so there's something in this Black History celebration for everyone. And I think you'll learn a little bit in each moment that we share, hopefully, or reflect upon something that you know to power you to share and to, as Frederick Douglass says, every citizen should contend for his opinion or her opinion of the Constitution, propagate it, and advocate for it. And so these moments of history hopefully will inspire you to have an opinion of your role in our great world, in our young country, as Frederick Douglass opines, that in our country, in respect to the world, that you and I should have an opinion of where we stand with the Constitution and whether it's living up to its intended purposes. And then what about the power of the one citizen who's able to both propagate and advocate for a different end? I'm Marcus Holmes, and whether you're watching me on LinkedIn Live, Facebook, on Marcus R. Holmes page, on the Love and Stuff page, whether you're watching me on Twitch TV or YouTube events, I am always grateful that you come and to share. I hope you will click share and that you will tag someone to learn a little bit more about the writings that we have shared today of Frederick Douglass. And as we have done for the last 7 days, and we'll do for the next 21, we want to continue to have moments of Black history. I invite you to join us next Sunday, February 14th, for a special Love and Stuff Valentine's Day treat at 4:00 p.m. You can go to our Love and Stuff page and you can secure your ticket for what will be a wonderful cinematic presentation. We have some independent artists whose video shorts, film shorts rather, will be included in that. Some wonderful music, some wonderful opportunities for prizes, and you don't want to miss that. It's a great opportunity, whether you are going to be at home with your significant other, your boo or bae, or whether you are single and you're going to be by yourself on Valentine's. Come and share that time with us at 4:00 p.m. It will do you well. You will have a great time and you'll be happy that you took the moment out to get a ticket and to join us. Have a grateful rest of your weekend and have a grateful week this week. Thank you so much.